Right now, I want to welcome from the Southeastern Legal Foundation, Shannon Goessling, the Chief Legal Counsel, is with us. Shannon, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so tell me about why the Southeastern Legal Foundation is getting involved in the case of Bundy Cobb.
Well, because Mr. Cobb, like thousands of Georgians and millions of Americans, has a right to vote if he's qualified, and he is. He takes his civic duty responsibly and seriously, and the government officials attempted to stop him from voting because he was wearing his NRA instructor hat. I mean, that's a First Amendment violation. He has a right to expression. He has a right to speech. He has a right to association. And all of it was done because a single poll worker decided that she could stop him, and that's just unacceptable.
All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I don't know how good a job I will do. But Bundy Cobb was able to vote, Shannon. All he had to do was take off his hat. So what's the big deal? No harm, no foul.
Well, let me ask you, what if a voter arrived at the polling place wearing a hat with the logo for International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, a large union with offices in Atlanta, or that they took the position that because that person was wearing it, they were affiliated with Democrats? Just like the poll worker and the Douglas County election supervisor took the position that the NRA was affiliated with Republicans. Now, we know that's not true, but this is about how we relate to our government. This is about what we expect from our government. And when a random voter calls in and says, I don't like that so-and-so is wearing an NRA hat, instead of the government saying, every person has a right to free speech. Every person has a right to freedom of association. There is nothing about the NRA that is on the ballot. There is no Second Amendment issue on the ballot. And as a result, we must protect these fundamental rights. That's not what the government did. The government let a random person influence government policy to the detriment of Mr. Cobb and voters. And this has a direct and immediate, and ironically, during an election cycle where voter suppression and voter ID laws are political lightning rods. So, yes, he had to take off his hat. But should he have had to? No, absolutely not.
All right. So what would justice be in this case, Shannon? What would be a just outcome?
Well, a just outcome would be that the Douglas County officials apologize to Mr. Cobb, apologize to the voters of Douglas County and Georgia, that they agree to an order of the court that declares their policy or practice or custom unconstitutional, a violation of the First Amendment rights that Mr. Cobb has, and to agree to be precluded from having such a policy forevermore. And that it be posted in every single polling place so that the government doesn't use its discretion, its unfettered discretion, to influence the ability of people to express their views in this country.
Has there been any statement by Douglas County officials? I know that, on Election Day, one of them gave an interview to a local a press outlet in which Lori Fulton said that this was an abundance of caution because of the potential perception that some voters might have here. Has Douglas County done anything on their own before their lawsuit to say, gee, we're really sorry, Mr. Cobb, we shouldn't have done this and this won't happen again?
Nobody has contacted Mr. Cobb to apologize to him or to take responsibility for this this policy. They should have, but they didn't. We hope that they will accept responsibility now that the case has been filed. But if we don't, Mr. Cobb and his family are prepared to go as far as it is necessary to take this. This is, look, I mean, a lot of people say, well, this is about the NRA. Well, I'm on NRA radio, but this isn't about NRA. This is about the right of Mr. Cobb to affiliate himself with the NRA, to provide his support for the Second Amendment. Just like anybody else who would wear any like shirt or hat, we are entitled to do that. And the problem, the chilling effect that this has is that If he refused to take off his hat, do you know what could happen? He could be reported for the misdemeanor of electioneering. He would be investigated and potentially prosecuted and subjected to imprisonment and or a fine. That's how how the government chills the ability of people to speak their mind. And we're so proud of Bundy for stepping forward. Yes, he took off his hat because it was important for him to vote, but he called in the press. We all know who Bundy Cobb is because he is standing strong, not just for himself and his family, but Georgia voters and all voters across the country. This is important for us to stand strong together so that nobody allows the government to give this impression that they have the authority to control us in this way. This is a fundamental right that we're protecting.
You know, and again, Shannon, it is a right of all Americans. It's not a right of NRA members. You're talking about the right of a member of Moms Demand Action to go to a polling place with her Moms Demand Action hat on or her Moms Demand Action T-shirt. And if someone were to say, you can't wear that because, you know, those are all just a bunch of Democrats, that would be just as wrong. What you were talking
Absolutely.
about, as you say, this is not about the NRA. This is about the First Amendment. This is about the rights that we all possess as Americans.
That's exactly right, and you know we're honored to represent Bundy, and we're proud of the fact that you know he is standing strong, not only in advocating for his role as a member of the NRA and the importance of gun safety. That's what his hat does for him and his community every day. But then that he goes that extra step as a member of the NRA, he stands up and he says, "I am going to protect our right to associate. I'm going to protect our right to freedom of speech. I'm going to protect our right to vote and not allow the government to infringe on that and abuse those rights." And that. I mean, how can you not value that in a fellow American? So we're honored to represent him and the interests of all Georgia voters and Americans who have a right to vote as qualified voters, going to the polls and sharing who they are and informing themselves about candidates and, you know, going into that polling place and marking their candidates. It's for everybody.
Yes, it is. So, obviously, Douglas County, they've got some time to respond here, what, a month or so?
They do. They have 30 days from the time that they're served. We're ever hopeful. I'm an eternal optimist, even as a lawyer. I'm hopeful that they will respond positively to this action, that they will take responsibility for what they've done and allow us to come to an agreement. But if they don't, you know, we are prepared to present to the court these constitutional violations, and we will seek an order from the court to declare the unconstitutional policies of Douglas County and these discriminatory acts by these individuals, the supervisor and the poll worker, and we will make case law here in Georgia.
Shannon, before we let you go, I've just got to ask, what is your impression? Are we getting, as a nation, are you seeing more of these types of cases, the stifling of speech or the attempts anyway to crack down on the free expression of Americans?
Well, to be frank, I think it is true, and it's amazing the power of the individual that wields government. I mean, you're talking about a single poll worker who is taking a stand against constitutional rights and then being supported by the supervisor of elections, who's then supported by the board of elections, who's then supported by Douglas County. People think an individual doesn't matter, but an individual who represents the government has a tremendous amount of power. And I think maybe instead of curtailing fundamental rights, what they should do is stand up for fundamental rights. And that's exactly what the poll worker should have done, the supervisor of elections should have done. We've seen this out west. We've seen cases in other states and other federal circuits. But that's why it's important. Every single case where we hear about a type of violation like this, and imagine what people thought across the country when they saw those news articles and you saw Bundy on television. What impression did that give? That gave an impression that the government could chill speech. The government had authority. The government could threaten criminal prosecution. What does that do to the next person in line? They have fear, right? It has an effect. That's why it's so important to stand up every single time we find out that something like this happens, and force the issue so that government stays where where they're supposed to be, and it's on that side of the line that respects our constitutional rights, our fundamental rights. And when they step over into our purview as citizens, we get to push them back, and we push them back by filing lawsuits. We push them back by speaking out publicly. We push them back by joining organizations that fight for our rights, like the NRA. That's what we do, and that's what we have to continue to do, because if we don't, the government will step over the line, and they will keep on coming.
Well, listen, Shannon, I appreciate you coming on the program, and thank you for what you're doing. Would love to have you back with any updates on Bundy Cobb's case.
Absolutely, and if anybody's interested in tracking the case too, please don't hesitate. It's at www.southeasternlegal.org. That's southeasternlegal.org.
All right, Shannon Goessling, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your week.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure. Shannon Goessling from the Southeastern Legal Foundation, the Chief Legal Counsel, with us here on NRA News, Cam and Company.